My list of reasons to be deeply grateful for my Catholic faith only continues to grow. Where most of the world quit the celebration of Christmas, about 11:15 on Wednesday morning, we're going to keep going. So, once again, Merry Christmas. And it's not as though we started on Tuesday night. In fact, we started, around October, November to prepare for a fruitful celebration of Advent. We spent Advent preparing for a fruitful celebration of Christmas. And what do we have to gain in this season of contemplating the incarnation of Jesus? And today's feast is a very good example of how God teaches us to be his children, not only through the fact of Jesus' birth, but the fact of Jesus' childhood. And you might say, well, Father Mike, we don't really know that much about Jesus' childhood. In fact, the scriptures are virtually silent, with the exception of this one anecdote about the finding of the child Jesus in the temple. We don't really know anything about Jesus as a child. And that's exactly the point. That is the first lesson that we can learn this week. It's not just around the fact of the incarnation, but for the vast majority of salvation history, all the way back to the moment of creation, God has been largely silent. And through human perception, it appears that God has done very little over that vast expanse of time. And so the first lesson for us is that God always begins in silence and what appears to us to be inaction. And the fact of the matter is that God continues to speak and to act even when to us it seems as though he were silent and we're taking no action at all. We are kind of misled by the scriptural accounts of God speaking. We think about creation itself. God spoke and everything that is came to be. We think about Moses and the burning bush, or we think about Jesus' baptism, or we think about the transfiguration. And we all build up this expectation that one day when we hear the voice of God, it's going to be something like, "This is God. This is what I want you to do with your life." When the reality is that God speaks in silence and acts in stillness. And you might think, well, what can I hear in silence? And what can I see in inaction? And this comes to the second great lesson of Jesus as a child, that he who manifests the perfection of humanity seeks first to perfect his humility. It is often said that humility is the mother of all virtues. And people come to me all the time, "Man, I wish I were more patient. I wish I were kinder. I wish I were more generous." And I always tell them, you cannot will yourself to be a more virtuous person. Trying to make yourself more patient or more generous or more kind or more loving is a little bit like thinking that you want to raise yourself up off the ground, and so you're going to reach over and grab your ankles and pull as hard as you can. And trying to make yourself a more virtuous person is as exhausting as trying to lift yourself up off the ground. And one of the great tragedies in the world is the fact that, people are out there striving to make themselves a better person, and then they fail, and then they give up trying. But if we generally do want to grow in the virtues and in holiness, we can look to the example of Christ as a young person who sought first to grow in humility and in obedience. And as Luke testifies, he grew in stature and wisdom. And only very late in his life here on earth did he emerge in order to speak in a way that we can hear, to speak in the style of a human person, and to act in the style of a human person, and so reveal to us God's plan for the salvation of the world. And one of the greatest examples of how to grow in humility is given to us in the litany of humility. Now, there's some dispute. I was taught long ago that the author of the Litany of Humility is our patron saint, St. Francis of de Sales, and that may or may not be true. It's not a barrier in my growth in faith, so I'm going to continue to believe that it is, in fact, St. Francis de Sales who wrote that prayer. But that's not the important part. The important part is that the Litany of Humility is divided into two parts. And it begins with a series of petitions that the Lord deliver us from the barriers to humility, those things that tend to destroy whatever measure of humility may be present in our lives. And taking them all on at once, it's a little bit overwhelming, and so it's been my practice to read through all of the things that we ask the Lord to deliver us from, and to identify, this is the one that's really tripping me up. And some of the more common aspects of the Litany of Humility that I contemplate in my life and seek to implement into my life is first, Lord, from the desire to be esteemed and recognized, deliver me, Jesus. And how many hours have we spent trying to get noticed, trying to get someone to comment on the good that we have done? Another one is, Lord, from the desire for the good opinion of others, deliver me, Jesus. And again, how much time and energy and attention and passion have we wasted trying to earn the good opinion of other people? Perhaps the most challenging one, Lord, from the desire to be loved, deliver me, Jesus. And it has been one of the great lessons in my life, and one of the great insights of my life, to discover that I had spent countless amounts of time, energy, attention, and passion trying to get other people to love me the way that I want to be loved. And one of the great disappointments of my life is realizing people are only ever going to love you in the way that they choose to love you. And so the Litany of Humility guides us to be free of that unreasonable expectation, to put ourselves in a position to simply allow others to love us as they choose to love us, and to pivot away from the love of other people to the love of God, which never, ever fails to fill our hearts. And so, how beautifully timed this feast is. Because right about now, we're starting to put together our list of ideas of what is going to make 2025 a great year. I don't know about you, but after 2024, I'm stacking a lot of chips on 2025 is going to be a better year. And there is no better way to create hope for our future than to simply ask the Lord that we might emulate his humility, his obedience, his relative anonymity, so that we might grow again as he did in stature and wisdom. And it is my sincere prayer for myself, for everyone that I love, and every member of this community, that when we arrive at the Feast of the Holy Family in 2025, we will all fill our lives with stories of how God went to work in our lives this year in a way that he never has before.